What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. While I'm slightly late to the party here, as we're well into July by this point, I did want to stop for a moment and talk about what were some of my favorite movies of 2022 so far. Because better late than never, right? Any chance I'm taking to do another list video, I'm jumping all over that. So before we begin, let me know in the comments what your favorite movies of 2022 so far are. As always, this is just my list and not a definitive ranking. Also make sure to hit that thumbs up button if you like these videos, as it helps me out immensely by getting my content out there. And if you're new here, I hope you consider hitting that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with more movie related content on a near daily basis. So I've seen a lot of movies already this year, more than I was kind of planning on. As you know, I see and cover everything from blockbusters, foreign indie dramas, genre-heavy films, Oscar contenders, weird little hidden gems that aren't getting that much attention, and whatever else possibly comes to mind. If I hear it's good, I will check it out, and there were a lot of movies this year that I heard were good, and most of those I did like. So in the spirit of better capturing the eclectic range and amount of movies I've seen, we're going to talk about 20 movies. Yes, 20. Believe me, I've seen a lot. And it would just be a shame to leave off so many really good movies if I only just did like a top 5 or top 10. Even with my end of year list, I do the same thing. So we're doing that here. And unless you've been closely following every single review I've ever done for these and know my exact ratings, I'll keep this in alphabetical order so that way it doesn't fully give away which ones have the better shot of also being on my end of year list, because that'll just make things a little more fun. But I've been talking enough. Let's not waste any more time. My favorite movies of 2022 so far are, in alphabetical order, The Batman, a horror-inspired take on the character that also includes elements of film noir and David Fincher movies. It might be another dark and gritty take on the character, but it also does so for a specific reason, and where it takes things with the character, the tone makes total sense and it never feels depressing for the sake of it. Despite being 3 hours, it balances out a number of intriguing storylines, with characters like the Riddler, the Penguin, Catwoman, and so many more, and for the most part, it felt like we got just the right amount of time with each character. Plus, of course, Robert Pattinson makes for an excellent Batman, with a great balance of this traumatized recluse that is Bruce, while also being this symbol of fear as Batman himself. Beyond the Infinite 2 Minutes, probably one of the least seen movies on this list, which turns what could have easily been a gimmick into something totally high concept. It's not the most emotional movie out there, but don't mistake that for being hollow or one-dimensional. It still tackles interesting topics and themes like free will and predestination in a meaningful enough way. It's just that it also does so through a lot of giddy optimism and wonder and awe. These are characters I couldn't get enough of and wanted to spend more time with. And while we see them wrapped up in this scenario that's so unbelievably trippy, the film also manages to take its more out there plot points and make them still feel completely digestible so that you still have a lot of fun with it, creating a refreshingly original spin on the time travel genre. The Black Phone, the latest from Scott Derrickson, which strikes a nice balance between being a grounded atmospheric horror while also playing into these supernatural elements. And while the film doesn't fully explain said supernatural elements, the film's execution is otherwise really smooth. It plays more like a thriller than a horror at times, but Derrick's direction will leave you pretty consistently on the edge of your seat. Plus, these are all well-written characters, each with distinct personalities. The two leads, newcomers Mason Thames and Madeline McGraw, are both great here, while Ethan Hawke, in a rare villain role, is excellent as the Grabber, who's easily one of the creepiest horror villains we've got in quite some time. The Bob's Burgers movie, which essentially feels just like an extended, grander episode of the TV show, and it's one which your enjoyment of will mostly be based off of how you feel about the show. But that's also exactly part of its charm. It's an hour and 40 minutes of the Belchers getting into all their usual hijinks with rapid-fire throwaway jokes galore, but with some extra musical numbers and a murder mystery thrown in there. And while it doesn't reach the profound levels of emotion you get in, say, a Pixar movie, it still has plenty of heart and charm to go along with it that it's sure to delight. Cha-Cha Real Smooth, the second film from up-and-coming director Cooper Raiff, which might have the feel of your typical indie quirky comedy, but the presentation makes it such a joy to watch. The film explores these very relatable themes about coming into your own and figuring your life out well into adulthood, shown through two charismatic lead characters who are at two totally different stages in their own lives. It doesn't necessarily lead to groundbreaking stuff, but it has so much heart and sincerity to it, along with a sharp sense of humor, that more than makes up for it and makes Raiff a director you should be on the lookout for. Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers, which is essentially the modern-day Who Framed Roger Rabbit, with the way it pokes fun at the animation medium as a whole. And it's the sort of movie that, if you love that medium, you're going to have an absolute blast with this. This movie's ultimate appeal lies in its charm and its sharp sense of humor. While it still adheres somewhat to the Disney brand, the Lonely Island style of humor is clearly felt all throughout this and feels just as much like it's their movie as it is Disney's. And it results in a lot of solid meta gags and fun one-liners, with John Mulaney and Andy Samberg being absolutely fantastic as the title characters. Dinner in America, a fast-paced, frantic, energetic punk rock film with two mismatched leads that tells a story about not conforming to social pressures, acting as a more high-speed, laugh-out-loud hilarious ghost world. It's a little rough around the edges at times with some of the dialogue, but for the most part, this is one of the year's funniest films, especially thanks to a sharp script and two excellent performances by Kyle Gallner and Emily Skeggs. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, which sees Sam Raimi in all his glory with his usual camera tricks, goofy sense of humor, and macabre imagery to make this an absolute blast. While there are some script issues, this ultimately benefited from its 2-hour runtime and its breezy pacing, with Raimi's flair and Danny Elfman's score vastly intensifying things. We also still got compelling character arcs for both Doctor Strange himself as well as Wanda Maximoff, with both Benedict Cumberbatch and Elizabeth Olsen giving great performances. With its fun horror imagery and macabre sense of humor, it makes me hope the MCU takes more risks like this. Elvis, which story-wise might just be yet another rags to riches musical biopic that we've seen countless times before, but everything in the execution makes it an absolute blast. Baz Luhrmann's distinct visual flair and frantic style, where literally everything's cranked up to a 12, makes this one of the wildest rides of the year, giving this very standard subgenre a sense of fun. But it's not just style over substance, as it's still emotionally compelling, thanks to a knockout lead performance by Austin Butler. On top of the fact that it can feel truly immersive, thanks to its immaculate sound arrangements, especially in the concert scene. It definitely teeters into camp territory at times, primarily with a cartoonish Tom Hanks, and it could have been maybe about 10 to 20 minutes shorter, but it's bombastic, over the top, grandiose, and larger than life, making for a good time. Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, the A24 multiverse movie, which is a wild mix of all these different tones, styles, and genres, all mashed together to tell an absolutely bizarre story, but one that also doesn't lose sight of its emotions or relatable characters, and it's quite profound and incredibly deep. It's just that it conveys all that through a mix of sci-fi, action-adventure, martial arts fights, and some really outlandish moments of humor. And it's all boosted by a phenomenal cast, led by an excellent Michelle Yeoh, badass Jamie Lee Curtis, and a very charismatic Ke Kwan, aka Short Round from Indiana Jones, in his first role in 20 years. It's not only an absolute blast, but it's also incredibly poignant. The Fallout, a film about trauma in the wake of a horrible tragedy, centering on how our grief and pain doesn't define us. While dark and emotional, it's surprisingly more positive than I was expecting, while never once downplaying the trauma these characters experience or oversimplifying its message. Jenna Ortega is the heart and soul of the film, while Maddie Ziegler also gives an exceptional performance as well, both exuding a lot of sincerity in this truly well-crafted film. Good Luck to You, Leo Grand, featuring a setup that could have easily just been another raunchy sex comedy, but turns out to be a heartfelt exploration of sex positivity and body positivity. The whole movie's very dialogue driven, and while that might not exactly be everyone's style, it'll reward those who stick with it, especially for the two excellent lead performances by Emma Thompson and Daryl McCormick. And altogether, it's a funny and emotional whirlwind of a ride. Happening, a brutal and heartbreaking, though painfully relevant drama with a message about how limiting access to safe medical procedures can lead to something truly existential by those affected. It's a gripping film with a consistent sense of unease, but it's never one that taps into its timely subject matter just for the sake of cheap drama, as it never loses sight of its humanity, thanks especially to some top-notch direction and an excellent lead performance by Anna Maria Bartolome. It's not an easy film to get through, but considering its timely message about the fight for bodily autonomy and a right to choose, it's one that shouldn't be missed. Midnight, a South Korean thriller that borders on horror territory as a serial killer chases a deaf woman through the streets of South Korea after she witnesses one of his crimes. It gives off the feel of something akin to Mike Flanagan's Hush, just moved to the streets. But, despite a seemingly familiar premise, it brilliantly finds ways to milk this structure for as much creative tension as possible, keeping you constantly on the edge of your seat as this cat and mouse chase unfolds. And not only does it just work, but its ways at evoking thrills never feels like a stretch. It's a gripping, brutal thriller with just the right amount of emotional depth. The Northmen, a visceral revenge tale from visionary Robert Eggers that gives us a much more morally ambiguous version of stories like Hamlet and The Lion King. While it contains mostly unsympathetic characters, You kind of don't care as you feel totally immersed in this unique little world and you get adjusted to seeing how everyone's values and viewpoints translate to this seemingly familiar story. It's a brutal, bloody, action-packed thrill ride where, once the energy level skyrockets early on, it almost always stays there, feeling like a constant adrenaline rush. RRR, a wildly over-the-top adventure that mixes an action-packed epic with a buddy movie, with a musical, with a political drama, with a heartfelt romance movie. And while you think all those genres would not go well together, well, you'd be surprised. While 3 hours long, rarely will the film even once feel boring, consistently hooking you in with its elaborate set designs and impressive choreography, with this endearing bromance driving the whole thing forward. To say it goes big in every way imaginable would be an understatement, and if anything about its tonal shifts might be jarring, it also kind of doesn't care. Now, that doesn't mean that every so often one of its scene transitions might not feel the smoothest, and some of its acting, primarily in the supporting cast, could have been a little better, but honestly, those will ultimately feel like minor issues, as for the most part, this is nothing short of riveting. Sweetie, you won't believe it. A horror comedy from Kazakhstan that's another one most people probably will have not seen on this list. Acting as a cross between The Hangover and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, this is full of goofy, caricature-like characters who might not all have our sympathies, but those who don't make up for it with some of the most vibrant personalities that deliver quite a number of belly laughs. While some may find its mixing of tones jarring, I thought it was clever in the way it effectively blended elements of slasher movies with parody-level over-the-top comedy. It had about 3 different storylines going on that were mostly interesting on their own, but when they all converge, it cranked things up from like an 11 to a 12, making for one hilarious ride. Turning Red, a very hyper-stylized spin on some of the usual Pixar elements, with a clear anime influence that involves extreme close-ups and expressive displays of emotion. This is one of the funniest of Pixar's most recent outings that also serves as a giant metaphor for puberty. While some have criticized this for not being as relatable as other Pixar films, I personally don't see that, as it offers a great storyline about the troubles of growing up, filled with a lot of the usual Pixar heart and humor, maybe just told in a slightly different way. And all in all, it's another win for the animation giant. The unbearable weight of massive talent, starring Nicolas Cage as essentially a walking parody of himself as he gets caught between being this fan's friend and being a secret agent. The film is essentially the internet's view of what we think of when it comes to Nicolas Cage, and it ventured into cartoon territory quite a number of times, but all in the best way possible. But while Cage himself was great, Pedro Pascal also shines, having just as many memorable moments that were nothing short of brilliant, and the chemistry between these two just makes me want to see more movies with them together. And finally, The Worst Person in the World, a subversion of both the coming-of-age drama and the typical romantic comedy, presenting us with a refreshingly honest look at how we're always figuring ourselves out, even when we hit certain milestone ages where we're expected to have it all together. Joachim Trier's direction and sharp screenplay offers us a relatable story that mixes both heartfelt and humorous moments, but this especially shines thanks to the wonderful lead performance by Renata Reinsve, who manages to keep charming us through some of her character's more flawed traits. It's a delightful, funny, and emotional experience that, for all the hype it was getting in 2021, it was most certainly worth the wait. But let me know, what are your favorite movies of 2022 so far? Was it anything I listed here? Was it something I left off? Let me know in the comments below so we can discuss. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and share it. And for more movie reviews and film discussion, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. Thanks for watching, everyone, and keep having fun with film.